The news is full of what's happening in Ukraine right now, and to the average person it's basically impossible to keep track. So let's make it easy. Here's the first important fact. Ukraine is basically split. The eastern half has historically been held by Russia. The people there speak Russian, and the people associate with Russia. The western half has been ruled by Poland, Lithuania, and Vikings. They speak Ukrainian and view themselves as European. Success as the Ukrainian president has been the ability to balance these two sides. And one more important point, Kiev is in the western half. The current crisis started in 2004. Leonid Kuchma isn't running for president, so the position of president is open. The two contenders are Yushchenko and Yanukovych. Yanukovych is the pro-Russian guy, so we'll call him pro-Russian guy. And Yushchenko gets poisoned and barely survives during the election process, so we'll call him poisoned guy. In an obviously fraudulent election, pro-Russian guy gets elected. This led to massive demonstrations in Kiev led by poisoned guy and Yulia Tymoshenko, or Blonde Girl. Blonde Girl made her fortune in the 90s as an energy mogul. She's very pro-Western, but was born on the Russian side of town. This makes her extremely popular with both halves of the country, and thus a hugely powerful politician. Ultimately, after the Orange Revolution, the Ukrainian Supreme Court overturns the election. It gets rerun more legitimately, and Poisoned Guy wins by the narrowest of margins. Blonde Girl is made the Prime Minister, and they almost immediately have a falling out, and Blonde Girl gets kicked out of her position. A few years later, Poisoned Guy brings her back as Prime Minister, and they again start arguing. As the financial crisis hits, it hits Ukraine especially hard, since they have a lot of heavy manufacturing. There's a widespread view that instead of dealing with Ukraine's problems, the leaders mostly liked arguing. The next presidential election comes and Poisoned Guy loses. Badly. And he disappears from our story. The two frontrunners in the election are Blonde Girl and Pro-Russian Guy. Pro-Russian Guy wins. Blonde Girl tries to say this election was fraudulent, but independent observers disagree. And then Pro-Russian Guy throws her in jail. She had earlier agreed a gas deal that many thought wasn't in Ukraine's best interests, so she was jailed for abuse of power. The West said that this was obviously politically motivated, but she was thrown in jail anyway. Come late 2013, Pro-Russian Guy has the opportunity to sign a trade deal with the EU. He vetoes it. This leads to minor protests in pro-Western Kiev. But a few days later, Pro-Russian Guy announces a deal where Russia buys billions of dollars of Ukrainian bonds and gives them a good deal on gas. It's widely viewed that the vetoing of the EU deal was in exchange for these bond purchases. The protests explode, and months later the protests have continued. November, December, January, February, and the harsh Ukrainian winter. Eventually, Pro-Russian Guy gives concessions. He offers the prime minister position to the leader of the opposition as well as weakening the president's powers. The protesters, though, have been hardened by months of freezing. They're upset by even the consideration of a deal. They want a complete resignation. And that's just not going to happen. In mid-February, the deal collapses. Police are sent in, the protest turns violent, people die as it turns ugly. In the chaos, Pro-Russian Guy left Kiev for his power base in eastern Ukraine. And when he did that, the pro-Russian government collapsed. A new interim government came in, announced new elections, freed Blonde Girl, and issued a warrant for Pro-Russian Guy's arrest for the mass killing of protesters. And people in the western part of the country are thinking, awesome! People in the eastern half are thinking, we voted for this government and now it's been toppled by some idealistic Kievan kids? Remember, Pro-Russian Guy was extremely popular, just not in the West. It's not like the Orange Revolution where we could say it was a flawed election. And in the next election, there's a good chance a pro-Russian candidate will win. It's not cut and dry. It's more like if every time a Republican was selected president, the more liberal Washington, D.C. overthrew them. So as of today, Blonde Girl is free, Pro-Russian Guy is on the run, either in East Ukraine or Russia, Poisoned Guy has retired to be blamed for most of these problems. If he and Blonde Girl focused on the Ukrainian economy instead of bickering, many view these problems could have been avoided. They're almost certainly wrong, but that is still a view. And the country is in chaos. So who will emerge to lead them out of this? Well, the current best guess is leader of the opposition and former champion boxer Vitaly Klitschko. Democracy is hard.